Welcome to the Whole Child Sleep Podcast, your ultimate resource for optimizing your child's sleep. We believe that truly understanding and enhancing your child's sleep goes beyond just bedtime routines. That's why we take a holistic approach, considering every aspect of your child's well-being, from their brain and gut, hormones, behavior, and much, much more. Join us as we delve into the fascinating world of sleep and explore how it impacts your child's overall health and development. Whether you're a sleep-deprived parent seeking answers, caregiver looking to establish healthy sleep habits, or just curious about the science behind sleep, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and embark on this exciting journey with us on the Full Child Sleep Podcast. Sweet dreams are just a listen away. Welcome to the Whole Child Sleep Podcast, where we help families nurture dreams and raise wholeness. I'm your host, Myra Hartzheim. I want to help you guys navigate daylight saving time. We are approaching November, so that means that we will be falling back. What that means in terms of sleep is that our sleep times will be moving hour later. We will be discussing two different approaches on this podcast, and the approaches will be dependent on whether or not your little one naps. Before we discuss the two different approaches, I want to talk about one factor that will apply to either approach, and that is choosing an increment by which you want to shift your child's sleep. You may want to consider how sensitive your kiddo is to dictate how quickly or how slowly you shift your little one. I have found over the years that more sensitive little ones have a little bit more difficulty shifting more quickly, especially if the sensitive little one is navigating sensory processing disorders or digestive issues. They have a lot more to manage compared to the average child. So keep that in mind. So if you do have a more sensitive little one, you may want to choose an increment that is smaller versus larger. All right, let's talk about the two different approaches. The first approach we'll want to talk about is if your kiddo is napping. If your little one is napping, we will want to shift firstly by moving first nap first. So what I mean by that is if your child takes, say, 2 naps a day, we'll want to start with that first nap of the day. Then in tandem with that, we will want to shift the second nap and then bedtime. Let me give you an example. Say your child naps 2 naps and bedtime's at 7. The first nap starts at 10 and the second nap starts at 2. We will want to start transitioning them to a later sleep time by shifting first nap first. So that first nap, say you've chosen a 20-minute increment, will start at 10:20. Second nap will start at 2:20. And then bedtime will start at 7:20. And you will continue that for the next 3 days, assuming that your kiddo is adjusting to the time change reasonably well. What you may see, which is quite common, is that when you shift your kiddo initially, you may see them actually waking up earlier rather than later. Just know that is very, very common, and what that indicates is that the body realizes that there was a change. What often happens when we're moving sleep times later is that the body compensates for that later sleep time by producing more cortisol. And so that often causes early rising. Okay, let's talk about the second approach. So the second approach is essentially the same as the first, except there are no naps. So you will be shifting their bedtime by the increment that you've chosen. Again, realize that your child's body may respond to that shift by actually waking up earlier rather than later. Know that is normal. Also, I want you to keep in mind that your little one may actually be more fussy, more irritable. That is normal when we are shifting sleep times. That affects the whole body systems. And that takes a lot of energy and a lot of work for the body to do. So be patient. Know that irritability is normal and that the body is just doing a lot of work. All right, so that is how I recommend shifting for daylight saving time. If you have any questions, please send them over, and I will talk to you all next week. Thank you for listening to the Whole Child Sleep Podcast. For references to articles discussed in this podcast or for evidence on the topics that we've discussed on this podcast, please look in the description below, or you can find the articles linked in our blog at curasleep.us. I want to give you an idea of what you can expect in terms of structure of this podcast moving forward. You can expect one podcast a week, and we will cover a topic for 2 weeks. The first week, you can expect the podcast to be more educational and informational. The following week will be more of a Q&A covering the same topic. If you have a question that you would like us to answer during the Q&A podcast, please send them in at 406-551-4083. And if you've found this podcast to be helpful, we ask that you share it. We would love to reach more tired families. We also ask that you subscribe and like and give us a 5-star review. This also helps us reach more tired families. We hope you have a beautiful day, and we will talk to you next week. By listening to this podcast, you understand and agree to the following. The content of this podcast offers the opinions of Meyer Hartzheim and her guests, and it is not intended as medical advice. It serves as an informational purpose. For personalized and medical concerns, consult your healthcare professional. The views and opinions in this podcast are our own and don't represent our employees or affiliates. The views of the guests in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect that of Cura Sleep Group. Our podcast and website are not for legal purposes, such as establishing a standard of care or expert witness testimony. We don't guarantee the accuracy of statements or opinions. We appreciate your assistance in maintaining content accuracy. If you find errors in our podcast or blogs, please reach out via email to support@curasleep.us. This podcast is owned by Cura Sleep LLC and presented by the Whole Child Sleep Podcast. Thank you for tuning in.